So welcome to another episode of Sassi Talks. I'm Savahna, your host, and on today's programme we have Dr. Gauri Seth, who is a doctor of psychiatry. She's also a parent of 3 and a parenting expert. She's also the founder of BrainBased Connections, which is set up and designed to help parents develop better connections with their children to foster positive mental health in their development. Dr. Seth, thank you so much for being on Sassi Talks. Let's dive straight in and get an understanding of what is BrainBased Connections all about.
Absolutely. So essentially, brain-based connection is it's a philosophy which suggests that if we can kind of consciously tune in to the connection with our children, and by that I mean really put connection on the map, because connection can fluctuate minute by minute, hour by hour with our children. And if we can really think about the connection that we have with them, my personal experience as a mother of 3 is that it can be quite helpful. And in fact, I would even say transformative to daily life. And the reason for that is when our children feel connected to us, parents, but also other caregivers, when children feel that connection, they feel that they matter, they feel that they're respected, and actually family life becomes easier because they listen more. So the kind of analogy is connection is a little bit like WD-40 to family life because there's less resistance. Children want to listen more. There's less screechy noises. There's actually less tantrums because of that felt connection. And having had 3 children, I feel that connection, there is a science to connection. There are ways that we can all boost connection in our day-to-day life. Some of these are quite simple strategies. But the reason it's brain-based is that it is rooted in a lot of the sort of science from neuroscience, psychology, psychotherapy as well.
It's very fascinating. I mean, when we talk about connections, there are different ways, obviously, to connect with people. Are we talking about communication here, or are we talking about the way in which we communicate? Are we talking about the things that we talk about with our children? What is the basis for this?
Absolutely. So communication is a huge part of connection. I would say, in addition, it's that sort of felt subjective attunement. So you can be sitting in the same room as each other and not be talking, but you can be feeling connected. You can be sitting in a different room as each other and feel connected. So connection is actually that sort of subjective sense that, look, my caregiver, they get me, I'm on their map. My needs are being met, I'm loved for who I am, no matter what. And obviously, so communication does come into that. And the way communication, I'd say, works with that is it's the way we talk, it's the words that we use as caregivers, which can really make all the difference for a child to feel that connection.
How do you achieve that? Because I would imagine there's parents out there listening to this thinking, okay, well, I read my children a book before they go to bed, we play some games together and what have you. It doesn't necessarily suggest that they're working on the children's mental health when they're doing this. So what is the next step? What do they actually need to do?
The first step for us to connect with anyone, including our children, is for us to think about our own state of mind, to think about our own wellness, our own emotional well-being, because it is a lot harder to connect with anybody if we're not actually connected to who we are and who we want to be and how we consciously want to parent. So it's the strongest sort of argument for parents to really prioritize their well-being, their emotional wellness, their self-care, whatever it takes for parents to reset. And it will be different for everybody. Every parent will have their own way of feeling kind of reset. So the first step is for parents to sort of think about their own state of mind. And then it's about really what I call zoom out to zoom in, which is essentially if we as parents can get quite good at being really flexible with our perspective. So if there's a dynamic with our child and they're having a tantrum, let's say classic supermarket, they're screaming on the floor, fabulous situation, we've all gone through it, it's very, very common. it's very difficult in that moment to sort of remain consciously connected. And in fact, it's probably more likely that as a parent, we might start getting judgmental, sort of judging our child, judging ourselves. Is this because I'm a terrible mum? Is this because, I don't know, I work too much? Why is this happening? And you can get a narrative which can be quite critical, either to ourselves or the child. Now, conscious connection is about zooming out and having a premise which is non-judgmental. So non-judgmentally observing what's going on from as an objective perspective as possible.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because you can really imagine that scenario. The kid in the supermarket, they've thrown themselves in front of the vegetable aisle. Mother's just finished work. She's super stressed. She's trying to pull another child in line with the trolley. And what do? So you can imagine that tired parent who may have finished a really busy day at work, and the last thing they want to do is be fighting with a toddler, and thinking about their own feelings in relation to that. What might they do? Because essentially a child could also just be pushing the boundaries to see what can they get away with.
Absolutely. And this is a question I do get a lot. So with conscious connected parenting, the philosophy is that in those moments where there is turbulence, that is not the best time to instill a boundary, because their sort of emotional state doesn't allow them to really hear the boundary. So you can say whatever you like, this is bad, this is not very good. But when they are triggered and their sort of emotional, what we call the limbic system, but when their sort of system is on, it's very difficult for them to really process new information. What we talk about is something called co-regulation, which is what the science is now sort of supporting, which is in order to sort of regulate the emotional state, a child's brain isn't fully developed to do that without support. Okay, so the part of the brain that we all need to regulate our emotions isn't fully developed till the age of 25. That's a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, and we all need that part of our brain to regulate. Okay, now a child, even a teenager, they haven't got their optimized prefrontal cortex yet. So what we're realizing is that it's actually through co-regulation that a child can calm themselves down. So what do you need for co-regulation? You need a connected caregiver.
I'm struggling slightly to get my head around it. I mean, it sounds like a great concept. The natural response for a parent is to say, stop that, get up, let's go, hold on to the trolley, hold my hand. Let them know that you are the authoritarian.
What isn't helpful is when we're wrapped into the boundary setting, that we then lose that sort of the opportunity for the child who's probably feeling quite vulnerable. So when they're triggered and upset, their fear network, their pathway, they're feeling scared because they don't know what's going on, why they're feeling so triggered. They don't understand because they're 2 or 3. So I think, if you had to choose one or the other, holding space, being with them, letting that storm pass is great. Of course, every parent has their own priorities, and there's plenty of flexibility for different parents to do this in the way they see right, because every parent is different. We all come from different backgrounds, different cultures. There's no right. It's very difficult to say this is right, this is wrong. It really isn't. But the point is that if children feel that acceptance, that they're not being rejected in those difficult moments, then that can really support their self-esteem, their sort of belief in themselves for the future. That, look, when I was really vulnerable, I wasn't rejected. Yes, I was given the boundary, but I know that I'm still loved no matter what for who I am. And the reason I'm really passionate about that message being really instilled into children's sort of psychology, or their subconscious really, is that having worked in adult mental health settings and seeing the trends with mental health and suffering, I think self-esteem is a really powerful thing that we could equip our children with. We are in such an opportune position as parents and caregivers to think about how is our child growing up, how do they see themselves? Do they believe they're worthy? Do they believe they're loved? And of course, parents love, we love our children. But how is it being perceived from their perspective? And how can we tilt the way we interact so that they really believe it? And that's where the sort of coaching strategies can come in, because it's not necessarily obvious. And I think, as I said, it's very triggering for us as parents because it is really, really not an easy ride.
It isn't, you're absolutely right. And especially now with parents, most households having two working parents, or even if it's a single parent household, working a lot of hours and being able to find time to take out for yourself as well as spend time with the children makes the whole dynamic even more challenging. It's finding that balance, I would think, with taking care of yourself, as you said before, and seeing how you are in those situations before addressing the child. What might a parent do if they are feeling particularly guilty about not having enough time to spend with their children? And that can also lead, I would imagine, to some frustrations and additional pressures.
Absolutely. So parent guilt is a significant issue for a lot of us, a lot of our generation of parents who, as you say, are also working. So my answer to that is, with parent guilt, I mean, it's a very deep emotion. It's a very sort of deep feeling. And there are a variety of ways people can handle it. Some people can turn away from the guilt because it's such a difficult feeling. And then they end up getting more involved in their work or whatever it is they're doing. I see guilt as basically really helpful data, so emotions are data. So if we turn towards that data and look at it and try and understand it, and then with that attitude, then say, look, okay, I'm feeling guilty. What am I feeling guilty about? Or what can I do about it? And one of the things I find works really nicely is when parents bring that conscious awareness to their connection with their children, then they actually feel better, and then they go to work with less guilt, because the time they have at home when they are with their children, it's emotionally attuned, it counts, and that connection is in their conscious awareness. But what we can do is really help our children develop those tools for themselves, which is self-esteem, being able to regulate their feelings, thinking about resilience, being flexible with their perspectives. Cognitive flexibility is a real sort of, it's a very powerful tool in your toolbox.
What 3 key takeaways would you give to our listeners, things that they could do to put this practice, this idea, this concept into motion?
When it comes to younger children, eye contact, lots of touch. We know that the more, we know from scientific studies that the more physical touch, it can actually have a positive impact on brain development in certain parts of the brain. So physical touch is good, hugs, eye contact. And then what I personally believe is that in those vulnerable moments, that's when you can really connect with a child. So when they're upset, if you can be there, co-regulate, be there with them, that can really boost connection.
Dr. Gauri, I have to thank you for being on Sassi Talks. It's been good to talk to you, and I hope that we have been able to inspire listeners to find out more about this topic and see how they can both help themselves and their children. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. To those of you watching and listening, you're very welcome to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram and on our various other platforms. And I look forward to speaking with you again on the next episode. Stay tuned.